Welcome to the Success Ascent. This is Pat Mancuso, your host and creator. On our episode today, we are excited to welcome Genevieve Piturro. Now, Genevieve is an entrepreneur, business owner. She is a coach and consultant. She's also an author. And yet, one of the things that she's most proud of is the Pajama Program. The Pajama Program has served more than 7 million pajamas, new pajamas, and new books for kids who are in need. I know that you're going to enjoy the episode today, so on to the ascent. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Success Ascent. My name is Pat Mancuso, and I'm excited that you're here today. We have an amazing guest with us today by the name of Genevieve Piturro. Did I get that right?
That's good. Thank you.
You know, I'm Italian, you're Italian. You'd think I'd be able to get that right. So, ladies and gentlemen, Genevieve has an incredible story she's going to share with us today. She's a successful entrepreneur, international speaker, consultant, and an author. She's the founder of the Pajama Program. And we're excited that she's here today. She's appeared on Oprah, Fox and Friends. She's appeared on GMA, featured in the Wall Street Journal. And so I know that we're going to gain an incredible amount of information today from Genevieve. So welcome, Genevieve.
Thank you, Pat.
I'm so excited you're here today. So let's start with, who is Genevieve? I mean, what I know about you is you were kicking butt in the corporate world, going up the corporate ladder, and something happened that caused you to say, yeah, maybe not so much. Talk to us about that.
Yes, you're right. Well, you ask, who is Genevieve? For a very long time, from the age of about 10, I wanted to be Mary Tyler Moore. So to me, that was success. That was a successful woman. And even though my dad came over from Italy on the boat, really off the boat, to give his children and his future wife a great life, I really didn't have that family, get married, have children dream that he and my mom had for me. So it was a little awkward being the first of 4 in this kind of a family, Italian traditional, and want to be Mary Tyler Moore. But I did. To me, success was that 40th floor in New York City, a corporate job, and working in television syndication, it turned out. And I loved it, Pat, I loved it. And for 12 years, that's what I did. I was single. I was, trying to be Mary Tyler Moore with a pretty apartment, a great best friend, some, fun dates and stories, and everything I thought was perfect. One afternoon, alone in my apartment, I heard a voice, and it came from here. We all hear this,
right,
constantly, but I heard something different that I had never heard before. And it was a voice, and I've come to know it as my heart voice. And it asked me, I heard it ask me, if this is the next 30 years of your life, is this enough? Well, you can imagine I was shocked. I was spooked.
Yeah.
And I sat down and I realized, no, I'm alone, and I will be alone. All I'm doing is working for me and to make other people richer. And I wasn't really contributing anything to anybody that was meaningful. So I thought, how do I bring children into my life, as quickly as I can, because I felt that's what was missing. And I called shelters, and I asked if I could come and read to children at night there. And pre 9/11 in New York, you got a great response like I did. Sure, you sound like a nice lady, come on in. And I would read to children, once, sometimes twice a week, different kids in emergency shelters, sitting on the floor of this very drab room. It was safe. That's what was the most important thing for these children who had been traumatized and hurt. But there was no place for me to sit. I sat in my corporate suit on the floor. The kids came in and I read to them time after time. One night I followed to see where they were going to sleep at night. And I was heartbroken to see what I saw. Futons and couches, 2 or 3 kids helped up onto the same surface, nothing to change into, wearing the clothes they've been wearing for who knows how long. Some of them were crying. And these flashbacks of my mom putting us to bed at night just flooded me. And all I could think as they were sort of pushing me out the door, because I know I was just stuck there.
Right.
I asked, can I bring some pajamas next week? I don't know why I asked that. To this day, I remember asking myself as I asked that question, why did I think of that? And they said, sure. And I did. And as I was giving them out that first night, one little girl refused to take them. Halfway through the line, she just kept shaking her head. No, no, no. And she came up to my hips, and her clothes were soiled. Her shoes were huge. She had sneakers on. Her pigtails were lopsided. My heart was breaking for her, but she was just so afraid of me. And she just kept saying, no, no, no. Finally, as she was watching me give them to the other kids, she didn't want to go to sleep yet. All the kids had their pajamas. We're going into that room to go to sleep. And I went back over to her and I knelt down and I tried one more time. I said, honey, don't you want your pajamas? I know they'll fit you. They're so soft. And I rubbed them on her hand. And she looked at me and she whispered, what are they? What are pajamas?
Wow.
That was it. That was it. I had to explain to her without breaking down, because I had those tears, I felt them. I didn't want her to think that she did anything wrong. And I got through it and I left, and then I broke down, and then I became obsessed.
I love it.
I didn't know I was looking for my purpose. I thought purpose was for Oprah and for Albert Einstein and for Deepak Chopra and for these amazing individuals.
Right.
But it's for all of us. And if you want to say that's how I found my purpose, it was in that moment. And I think a lot of us have those awakening moments.
Well, people sometimes look at purpose and they, like you mentioned, they see purpose so big in celebrities and people, who are doing just amazing things worldwide, Tony Robbins. And yet yours didn't start that way. It started basically with you giving your heart, and then all of a sudden it just took off. And so before we get too far into everything else, what advice would you give people that are looking to figure out maybe what their purpose is? I mean, I know you said yours kind of came almost by chance, yet it probably didn't. There were probably some things that you thought about. So what advice would you give to somebody who's looking for their purpose and struggling to find it?
I do think, Pat, I do agree with you. I think it was my heart voice was trying to speak up. But like so many times, I think we just don't listen. We're here. We're listening to, the brain things, what to do, how to do it, how to solve problems. And when we start to hear something that might be, I'll say, emotional, and it's not related to an emotion, we'll listen to our heart voice about loving someone or a family member needs us. That's okay. But if we hear it about a work situation or a path to take in life, we shut it down because it's scary. It's an emotional feeling that we're not used to attaching to a work or a professional decision.
Right.
And I think if you ask, because I've started asking that after that, I was single. Along the way, I met a wonderful man, and he teaches meditation. And that was not for me. I was an A-list person. I got things done. I had no time to watch the sunrise or sunset. But when I started talking to him, because he got this whole spiritual, religious God universe thing.
Right.
He said, keep asking. That's the secret. You have to ask and let your heart know that you want it to speak, that you're listening, that you're ready. And so that's part of my coaching, it's part of my book. Talk to your heart. Ask it. Ask it for indications, ask it for signs, ask it to speak up, and it will.
So I think the big thing I just took away from that is to keep asking, instead of ask once and you don't maybe hear an answer or see an answer, and then then you just move on. So right. I love that. So the Pajama Program, it starts with you handing out pajamas at one center, if you may, in New York City. What's happened since then?
Well, we celebrate 20 years officially next year. I've been doing this for 23, because before I even knew what, a nonprofit or 501c3 was, I was, running around my neighborhood in Westchester County, my job neighborhood in Manhattan, and up and down the borough. So it's been all this time. And to this day, we have over 63 chapters around the country in all these cities. Wow. And 7 million new pajamas and new books so far to children who don't have a bedtime that they have a right to. It's just this niche. I started just with pajamas and books because it's literally all I could handle by myself, and this was a secret I was doing when I had my job.
Right.
And it's just stayed this niche that is special to us, and it's special to the children, and it's special to all of our supporters all these years.
So obviously as a 501c3, you know, the word profit doesn't come into that, right? It's a nonprofit, yet you have to grow it as a business. I mean, even though it's a nonprofit, you have to grow it as a business. And so our podcast is A Success Ascent. And, you know, that's what we focus on, is people's success journey. So talk to us a little bit about that journey for you in growing that nonprofit.
Well, you know, it's so funny when we both just mentioned 501c3. I didn't know this was called a purpose. I thought it was an obsession. I didn't say I found my purpose. That's not what I said.
Right.
I just said I can't imagine how many more children there are. And of course, as soon as I started bringing more pajamas, the staff would tell their friends at other places, and I would get calls, and it became this secret operation with this big cell phone back then that I was trying to hide from my bosses, and all the pajamas and all the books that I was hiding in the closets and in my suitcases that I'd roll into work. So
you were still doing this while you were doing your corporate job.
I couldn't quit. I had a mortgage.
Oh, wow.
But I knew that if I didn't plan to quit, I was going to be fired, because my work ethic, which was up here, was slowly, you know, and because nobody knew why, I wouldn't blame somebody for saying, you know, Jen, I'm sorry to tell you this, but you know, we have to let you go. So I was definitely walking a very thin line. So what happened was I met this great guy early on, and I'm thinking, nobody knows about this, but I've got to say something to him, because he thinks he's getting involved with a woman who, if we go further, is going to be a 2-income family, and that's not the truth. And so when I mentioned to him, and it sounded so ridiculous, I'm sure, I'm thinking about quitting my job. I went to read to a shelter, and these children don't have pajamas. This little girl asked me, what are pajamas? And so I'm thinking about quitting because I want to bring pajamas. And I'm saying it to him, and I'm thinking how ridiculous it sounds, right? And he says, I think you should go for it. And then I knew. So together, he would drive me. We had one car, his car, because I was a city girl.
Yeah.
And we, you know, he drove me everywhere. It became an obsession. And one day I got a call from a woman who said she was from a national magazine, parenting magazine, and she was going to write a little story, which she did, little. Well, the thousands of boxes and packages and pajamas and notes and cash that came to my co-op, I thought I was going to get kicked out. The doormen were having a fit. There was no place else to put all these boxes. They were throwing them in the elevator with me and yelling at me in whatever languages I didn't even understand. If it wasn't English, I didn't know what they were until I got up. My apartment was a sea of boxes. We started opening them because we were just shocked. And we found out the magazine had hit the people's homes before the newsstand, and immediately they were drawn to help. One of the letters said, please send us your 501c3 because we'd like to give you a grant. And I looked at Demo and I said, what is this 501c in the parentheses and then the number 3? So what I tell people, I coach and I say in my book, and I tell people when I speak, I knew nothing. If I could do it, you can do it. And then, Pat, I had to because I looked at it, I said to him, this is not just something I'm doing for these children. This is now a responsibility to all these people who trust me to give all these pajamas and books to the children. So I better get organized. So I had to beg, borrow, and steal lawyer, a financial person. You know, my books were listed, you know, on paper and pen with how much I spent, and I got into debt. That's all, you know, in my book. And sometimes I talk about it because it's embarrassing. But I mean, it was just, I did day to day what I had to do. And then, like you said, when I realized this is a responsibility,
right,
I had to get serious and get people ask for help. And embarrassingly, I didn't know anything. So it took a lot of courage for me to say, it doesn't matter if I feel stupid, I've got to ask and get answers.
Yeah. Well, and you said something which, you know, even though you might not have known the books, known the numbers, your passion and the purpose was there, and that was going to far exceed. You'll figure out all this other stuff.
Yeah.
That's the easy part.
That's what I
The
thought.
harder part that people struggle with is what's here, right? And
Yeah.
where they go.
Yeah.
So let's dial forward a little bit. Obviously, the nonprofit is having huge impacts. So you decide to write a book. Purpose, passion, and pajamas.
Right.
Right, that one right there. Yeah, I love it. So talk to us about the book, because writing a book is not easy.
No. Well, it's funny because I was founder, of course, and executive director. I learned the lingo. I didn't even know what you call that person, right? But as executive director.
Right.
So for most of the time, and I tried to write the book while I was executive directing. And it's hard to write a book, number one.
Right.
And when you have a full-time job that's also your baby and you're emotionally attached to it, it's hard to pull away. It's not a job, it's your life when you're a founder, I believe.
Right.
So writing the book was not happening while I was sitting at the desk. Also, my favorite part of everything Pajama Program was telling the story of the little girl and talking to people, speaking to others who want to make a change in their life and telling them, hey, I did it. Believe me, you can do it. You're probably smarter than I am. And I wanted to do more of that. But I found as we were growing, like we said, I never expected to grow like this, more paperwork, more contracts, more staying, losing sleep over crossing T's and dotting I's.
The business.
Yeah. I got it to the point where it was successful and, enough to keep going. And I went to the board and I said, I've been wanting to write a book. I would like to give up my executive director title and salary and hire somebody who can take my baby to college. And one of our past board presidents was an attorney. And she had said to me, if you ever want to leave that title behind, I'll jump at it. So we hired her a few years ago, 3 years ago, and she's exactly what we need. Being an attorney, she's got the brain and the head. And I like to say I've got the heart and the story.
Yeah.
She has a heart, of course. But when it's your baby, it's your baby.
Yeah.
And when it's your story, and that's what I miss.
Story.
Your story. So the last few years, she's been doing that, and I've been talking about everything Pajama Program, not only our story of how it started and how it grew, but inspiring people to listen, to ask your heart voice. If this is the next 30 years of your life, is this enough? What do you want to do? Can you jump in like I did? I took a lot of risks and it wasn't all pretty.
Yeah.
But that's all I know. That's the kind of person I am. I jump in, then I learn how to swim. Some people are like that. But I also teach about slide. You can slide your purpose or your passion into your life. And I go through a whole process with clients and things. I'm doing that. And especially in this time of going through,
right,
putting food on the table is number one. Some people are at this point saying, you know what, the heck with it. I'm going after my dream.
Right.
But if you can't, I say to people, don't push whatever your dream on the back burner that's been on the back burner further back. Bring it up. Slide it in for an hour a week. Let's talk about how to strategize where that can take you. And it makes a world of difference, Pat, in how they feel, their hope level, their love, their joy. And not only do they feel good in this time we're going through because they just are doing something with their passion, everybody in their life feels that same vibration from them.
So let me ask you a question. You touched on the world we live in today, right? And so what type of challenges, if any, has the nonprofit scene with what we're experiencing?
Well, the biggest thing, I mean, we're all experiencing fundraising issues. It's not the same, right? We're not having large gatherings, which is hard for all nonprofits.
Right.
We have reading centers. The Pajama Program brings children in. We bus them in 2-3 times a day, groups, so that they have us to read them a story and we give them the new pajamas. That has stopped because we can't bring the children in. That's the heartbreak for me and for all of us. And the story time we're doing virtually. You know, our executive director and the staff are doing it on, you know, social media, on Facebook, and reading stories to children for those who we serve, who have access to that or can get access to that virtual storytelling. But it's very hard. It's very hard for people to work at home. You know, I always said I wanted to build a family, and I feel like I did. And then to be separated, not feel that warmth, especially when there are children there, it's very hard.
Yeah, a lot of pivoting having to go on, and so I just was curious. You're pivoting like everybody else is having to pivot.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
So let's shift gears a little bit. So now you're impacting entrepreneurs, you're impacting business owners, not in the nonprofit world and outside the nonprofit world. What are you learning about going through that journey as you're working with others? What's the biggest thing you've learned from that?
I've learned to start by saying, yes, it can be scary. Okay. Because you can't pretend it's not.
Right.
A change is scary. Thinking about giving up something that has sustained you, that has, you know, given you in your mind the respect of people in your world, that you've done a good job, to look at those people and say something like I did, and I can talk about a naysayer that was, you know, it was so difficult to look at those people and say, you know I've been an accountant, or I've been whatever I've been, but I think I'd like to teach piano. And if you're honest and say, I really don't have a client yet, but I want to do it. By God, I'm going to do it. It's scary to think of having those conversations, and you talk yourself out of it so often. And I try to start by talking about my fears, and and the sleepless nights and the tears and the worry. So first, you have to know that it's okay, because nobody gets off without being scared. Right. None of the people who have made a huge difference in their lives and the lives of others can say it was a walk in the park. Never.
Being honest. Yeah, absolutely.
That's true.
So you talk about human connection leads to success. Tell me about that.
Yes. That's my TED Talk that I just did when my book came out in August, was one idea plus the human connection equals 7 million pajamas and books. Along the way, now remember back 23 years ago, we didn't have all this social media.
Right.
I was telling my story to anybody who was standing still. That's what I had, my voice. We had email, and I can just turn and on a line at the store when I was holding pajamas, I could start talking about it. It just kept coming out of my mouth. And that human connection, which again, I look back on, was the key to success. People want to hear your story.
Right.
You want to hear people's story. That's what we have in common. We can listen, we can hear, we can understand. And when you both find something, when one person tells a story and the other person feels, I get that. Right. Magic. It's magic. Whether you need help, whether you need a friend, whatever you are looking for, if you make that match, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. And that's all we want to do, is share our stories. That's the heart voice. That's the reason purpose, the word purpose, exists. That's shareable story.
Well, and I think that, and you let me know if you connect with this. I think that's why a lot of people are struggling right now based upon how we're living our lives. We're human beings, and we weren't built to be human disconnects. And because we can't connect, and I actually think you see this with people more and more as we're starting to talk a little bit about going backwards and, how we're open and how we can connect and how we can come together. And I think the impact of that we're going to feel for years to come, because we're just not built to do this, right? I mean, it's great to do a Zoom once in a while. However, to live on Zoom, I'm sure we're going to have like a Zoom, diagnosis somewhere along the way of how Zoom is going to, have impacted
us.
Yeah, there's going to be something with that. So let me shift gears.
But Pat, let me mention something. I found it's we can say coincidental that when we wear our mask, we're forced to look each other in the eye.
Okay.
And I think that that's very telling that it happened to us now, because you can't read lips. Sometimes you can't hear what people are saying if you're not looking them in the eye, which we probably didn't most of the time, if not most half the time when people were talking to us. But now we find ourselves looking in their eyes to communicate, because you have to hear and you have to see the feeling.
Right.
And I think that that's remarkable. So I think that there's a lasting impact of that, as well as that'll be positive.
That'll be positive. Yeah.
I hope. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm with you there. So let's shift gears a little bit. Talk about the best advice you were ever given.
Goes back to why I start when I speak with somebody to tell them about the scary times and that you get through it. Feel the fear and do it anyway. I don't know if that was Nike, but it was.
I think it was.
Right? To me, to this day, because if you accept early on that it's going to be scary, it's less scary all of a sudden. I don't know how that works, but it is. So if you know you're going to expect your body to have some kind of a reaction, your mind, your heart, you're going to lose some sleep, but feel it, go through it, and you do come out. And I promise you, you're better for it. You're stronger for it. And every time you feel the fear and do it anyway, it's one less thing you'd be afraid to do again.
Well, and you build up that muscle memory of actually surviving and going through it. And now that's confidence going through it the next time.
Right.
So what about the worst advice you've ever been given?
That's a good question. I go back to what I mentioned before. There was a friend who I trusted to say, tell her a little bit about what I was thinking about doing. She was also a colleague, but not close enough that she could ever, damage my job because she wasn't working with me. And I started to tell her over a glass of wine. And I had prepped, but it came out, silly. Like I mentioned to you before, I just didn't have a script, and I really had no answer for any of the questions that anybody was going to ask me. I didn't know how I was going to do it. I didn't know how I was going to live. Okay. So I started to tell her, and she said, "What are people going to think?" Now that's not advice, but now or soon after, when I got back up, from the floor, I thought, I don't know what everybody's going to think, but that was a horrible question to ask me to make a priority of my decision. What are people going to think?
Yeah.
So I don't know if that qualifies for what's the worst advice.
Well, the thing is I think it does, because if you would have bought into that question and what the answer might have been, we might not be having this conversation today. You might not be impacting 7 million people. Maybe. And because that's it's funny. I talk about this a lot with our clients and in coaching is when you talk with other people, they tend to want to limit you at less than they see themselves. And so therefore, if you buy into that story that they want to paint for you, you're actually living the life that they see for you, which is not what you did and not what you should ever allow anybody to do, because they'll always see you at less than they see themselves. And that's just kind of how it works, right? And that's that advice that advice that she was attempting to give you was doing exactly that. She was attempting to limit you. And so interesting that, you look for advice from people and they actually give you great advice. It just doesn't look like that at the time. You don't see it that way at the time.
Yeah.
So
but I did learn from that question, from that conversation, was I should have gotten my cheerleaders in place. Then I got my cheerleaders in place when I was down, down and out. I started to talk to my family, people who loved me, and my mom, my North Star. She was on board. She said, I don't know how you'll do it, but you're smart. You're going to figure it out. And I wish I had that. And I tell people, cheerleaders first.
Yeah.
Because then you're not down on the ground for as long as you are when there's nobody around to help you out.
Did that happen? I'm just curious. Did that happen before the little girl in the interchange with the little?
No, because in the story, when I was telling her, I told her the story of the little girl. It didn't even phase her.
Yeah, I bet, although I understand and agree with what you're saying, I bet that if you went back to that story, even without the cheerleaders around, it wouldn't have stopped you.
No, right.
Yeah, you were determined.
Not.
You had that passion. You put that little girl in front of you in that little conversation, and that would drive you all the time, right?
Yeah. Right.
So if somebody wanted to make a donation to the Pajama Program, how would they do that?
Pajamaprogram.org.
Okay. And you accept donations, and do you still accept pajamas?
New pajamas and new books.
Oh, wow. Well, what a great organization. So I always like to ask my guests, what book you're reading right now? What book have you read that had a huge impact that you buy besides your book? Because they should buy your book. What other book? Any other book that you'd recommend?
I'm reading now The Girl with the Louding Voice, which I'm enjoying, which is a popular bestseller. And I joined Sir Richard Branson's book club and just got Mandela. And I'm looking forward to that. So those are the two that come to mind immediately.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that with me. I did not know that Richard Branson had a book club.
Brand new. This is the second book.
Yeah, I can't imagine that would be bad based upon his past track record.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So as we kind of tie everything together, Genevieve, what would be your final thought, your final advice, your final just going away present for our listeners?
Well, the number one lesson ties into the human connection, and the subtitle of my book is Purpose, Passion, and Pajamas: How to Transform Your Life, Embrace the Human Connection, and Lead with Meaning. And the one lesson I learned, and I actually saw it evolve physically in my mind, if you can say that, physically in my mind, as I was writing the book. So it's in there, and I'm happy to share it.
Go ahead.
We always hear when somebody's done something, the power of one. Wow, look at the power of one. Look what you did. And I heard that. I've said it, and people say it all the time about people who've done something incredible. All it takes is one person, the power of one. No, it's not the power of one. It's the power of one another that moves mountains and moves people.
Oh, I love that. The power of one another.
That's what it is.
I love that. I love
Proven over and over.
Yeah. Well, Genevieve, thank you so much. What a great interview today. And
thank you.
I mean, just like I said, oh my gosh, you're impacting the world one person at a time through pajamas, and who would have thought, right? It's just amazing. So, ladies and gentlemen,
I always want to share. I always want to hear people's stories. My website's GenevievePiturro.com. You can reach out to me there. I would love to hear your stories. I have a good ear.
Yeah.
And I'd love to, to hear and listen to anything anybody wants to share.
Well, and you're doing great stuff, and you have a number of resources at your website. So thank you so much for sharing that. So ladies and gentlemen, thanks so much for listening today at the Success Ascent. You can find us at your favorite podcast source. And as I say at the end of every session, be safe, be healthy, and have an awesome day. Take care, everybody.
Take care.
If you've not yet subscribed, please go to your favorite podcast source and subscribe to The Success Ascent, or simply go to www.thesuccessascent, and that's ASCENT.com, thesuccessascent.com. Thanks so much for joining us today. We look forward to catching you on the next ascent.